You know, if you're a documentary filmmaker and you uncover this hidden box of VHS tapes, there might be gold in those tapes. That gold might turn into a documentary called the El Duce tapes. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore, and I am excited to talk to the filmmakers behind the El Duce tapes, David Lawrence and Rodney Ascher. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. How you guys doing today?
Good, man. Good to see you, Chris.
Doing good. Real happy to be here.
Good to see you. Always great to talk to doc filmmakers. I'm a little biased. I love doc filmmakers. It is a labor of love. You know, when you're making a documentary film, it's not like you can send your butler out to get food for you, because as you know, it's a slog. It's hard work. And what I'm fascinated about with this documentary, the El Duce tapes, it's about this band, the Mentors, in get the era right, late 80s, early 90s-ish era. And the lead singer of that band, who was the performer and the leader, El Duce, and their kind of rise and their influence. And I'm blown away because this entire project, if I'm correct, and I love the fact that for anyone watching this right now, after you're done watching this, just look up the trailer for the El Duce tapes on YouTube, or if you're listening to this, look for it later. It's so cool the way you use that old school lettering it really just feels like the era. Everything is pulled from this box of tapes. Tell me about how you found the box of tapes, how you cobbled together what has to, from the looks of it, be hundreds of hours of footage in various forms. It totally works because you're not stepping out of it with modern interviews per se. It's all set in the time. Just tell me how this all came about. It just seems like a monumental project.
Well, we'll probably go back and forth a little bit. I think if I remember right, I think it started because I was just on a walk with me and David's mutual friend, Tim Kirk, right? And Tim helped produce. He produced Room 237 and worked with me on The Nightmare. We go back forever. And he told me that back in 1990, 91, 92, he and his friend, Ryan Sexton, a guy I'd never met, had filmed all this stuff with the Mentors and El Duce. And maybe there's something there. And I knew El Duce and the Mentor. I knew El Duce mostly from that short piece he has in the Kurt and Courtney documentary, where he talks about Courtney Love having offered him money to kill Kurt Cobain. And I knew the band by reputation, right? Like back then, I never saw the Mentors just because they never came through Miami when I was living. That's where I was living back in 1991. But I'd see every outrageous, punk noise band that would come through. And I remember there's a show that I missed that actually the guy, my friend Sid Guerin, who did those great camcorder graphics that you were talking about, he went and he saw them when they opened for the Revolting Cocks, and kind of laughed that Al Jurgensen and the Rev Code Ministry guys must have picked them especially to annoy the fans who came because they liked Ministry from sort of their Every Day is Halloween era. And that they were picked specifically to torture them. So Tim was able to convince Ryan to take the tapes out of storage and let us take a look at them. And I have to say, when I first looked at a couple excerpts, I didn't know that I saw a movie there, but David felt otherwise.
Yeah, I knew Tim. We'd worked on a few things together in the past, and then he wanted me to take a look at these tapes that had been digitized to see maybe if there was a short film that we could cobble together from this stuff. And I just started digging and pulling selects, and started to organize them, and it started to take the form of maybe this could be a feature. And so we were, just kept bouncing it around that way. And then we got a new installment of tapes that this guy, Ryan Sexton, who shot all the original footage, found in his storage. And that had maybe 50% of what ended up being in the movie in it. It was just really a gold mine. And at that point, Rodney and I just sort of jumped in together to make it into what it became. The whole process took about 2.5 years, just sort of, like you were saying, it's the sort of hard scrabble world of documentary filmmaking. We did it just on our own through passion and, wanting to release it into the world, kind of a urge.
Well, and it's interesting that you called out, the way that we tried to stay in this 4x3 2997 camcorder world. In fact, like when I was first getting out of school in late 80s, early 90s, I had done a lot of stuff just with 2 VCRs, holding the, record and pause button back and forth and making these mixed videos. And in fact, you released a pair of tapes that I bought from the back of Film Threat, that magazine, Cathode Fuck and TVOD, that were huge.
It's actually TV Sphincter.
TV Sphincter. Yes.
What's weird is you can find both of those. People are selling bootlegs of those on DVDs, and they're listed on IMDb as like a weird cut up tape. But there's a whole story behind the making of those. But yeah, no, we sold underground videos in Film Threat in the 90s.
Well, and those are hugely influential when we came to try to imagine what do we want this movie to look like. That we didn't want to, find Dave Grohl and shoot him in HD, nicely lit, and have him reminisce about his experience in Seattle and how he knew these guys. We wanted this to feel like a video that you might have got from the back pages of Film Threat magazine in 91, 92, where every once in a while, there's this, there's a hard edit and you're surprised, shocked, delighted, horrified by what comes next. And keeping it in that world was really, sort of important to, kind of the creative flow of it. And certainly Sid, who did those graphics, came from the same time and place as I did. And but it's great to be talking to you about it, because you are directly an influence for the way that this movie, for the way that this movie looks and feels.
Well, I want to compliment you on your creative choice, which was there's no narrator per se. The narrator are those little titles, right? And then it's all in the era. Like everything is like, it's not like you said, you could have gotten like this great, beautiful, DSLR footage, HD, it looks nice. It's like, no, this feels like a period film, and it's all from that era. And especially the thing that really brought me back was the Wally George footage.
His stuff is amazing. Well, and it's so weird because it looks like a Tim and Eric satire, a Tim and Eric kind of public access satire of Fox News. Only it happened, 10 years before Fox News hit the air.
Right. No, I really love the choice. I think at the beginning, like there's this almost like this like nervous feeling of like, what the hell have you guys uncovered? And there are things that you show in the doc that are shocking that happened with El Duce, that involve, defecation and vomit and urination and hand jobs and, just like all kinds of crazy shit, like stuff that is like those kinds of videos we used to sell in the old school Film Threat, like that are shocking, like Necromantic by Jörg Lutgeren,
sure.
like where I shouldn't even, it feels illegal to own this. And on a quick aside, I love the artwork, the key art that you guys have for this documentary, this elaborate painting. You got to look it up if you're, you just got to look up the artwork for the poster for this movie is beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Well, that's Ben Mara, who's like an amazing artist and comic book artist. You need to, I think BenjaminMara.com. He actually did a really interesting book last year that sort of retells the Jesus story called Jesus Freak, which is kind of surprising for him to take it on, because a lot of his stuff is just like, I don't know, beyond, R-rated, sort of intense concentrations and satires of kind of action movie or underground comic tropes. But yeah, no, we were really lucky to get him to be able to do that art for us. He's amazing.
So this was basically 2.5 years of you guys just fully focused on how do we make a story out of this? Because I will say that was the thing, like, as you get into learn who El Duce is, where he came from, his background. I mean, especially hearing him tell those stories, it must have been when you were going through all the hours and hours of footage to find those moments where he's very vulnerable and talks about his relationship with his father and how dysfunctional that was and abusive. And you really get this understanding of, oh, there's a reason he is the way he is. And then showing, which I thought you so well tied in the influence from who El Duce was and kind of where the culture went. I thought it was brilliant. And there is a score. There is like music that you use to enhance. I have to say, it's just so effective. I was so moved after seeing it. You know, when you see a good movie and you're like, well, I can't watch any other movies today because I still got a good movie taste in my mouth. I don't want to watch another movie. And I felt that way after I watched your doc. I really was like really blown away and moved by something that others might, at least if whatever they know about El Duce might say, oh, well, this guy's a disgusting person. There's so many more layers to it. And seeing his kind of rise and fall is unlike any music documentary I've ever seen. So.
Well, thanks. And I mean, I think one thing that we talked about, there's a few things happening, in the chronology as the movie plays out, but one of the cleanest through lines is that it's about taking the mask off, right? At the beginning, you see him at his most outrageous, and offensive on stage, and it gets more and more, sort of exposed and human as it plays out, which is not strictly a chronological telling of the story, but that was one of the things that were important to us. I think we had a way of describing it, which was to humanize him without letting him off the hook.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But that took a really long time to find in the balance. Like, we always knew we'd have, the story of his relationship with his dad, but where that felt the most earned or how to get out of that once you get there, that took a long time to feel out.
But I do believe that you did an amazing job of humanizing him through the, you see this sort of, armor and metal he kind of puts on himself, these defense mechanisms, and some of the kind of repulsive, behavior. It's like, well, you see the roots of that. You see kind of where that came from. You see like that he was looking to trigger an audience every single time he came out to perform. It was amazing. I also look at, like, if a performer like that existed today, I don't think they could exist today. I really don't think. I think that, like, with wherever the culture is going with Twitter mobs and all the sort of BS, the virtue signaling crap and the way that, like, everyone is, we can only have angels play people in movies now. Pretty much it's going to be actors and rock stars are just going to have to be priests who never had sex. I feel like that's the only way we're gonna, but like, you showed every flaw he had as a human, but he had a brutal honesty. I felt that, like, you guys really didn't hold back, but balanced by this is someone that is a person that is suffering inside.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is a different movie than I probably would have made before I had a kid. Right. Yeah. Because, I mean, there are scenes in it, especially when he's asleep and he looks, very childlike, that, I watched this movie and, or talk about El Duce with David and Tim, and one of the things, one of the ways I would kind of try to get my head around the story is that, it's the story of a little boy, a scared little boy who turns himself into a monster, and then the monster kind of gets out of control, and destroys him as well.
That's a perfect way to describe this movie for anybody. I think the artwork kind of shows that in a way, that the art that was your key art, I think, kind of manifests the statement that you just made. I think it's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, go right ahead.
I was just going to say a lot of the credit of, how much we get to know El Duce in the movie goes to Ryan, who shot the footage, because he put in the time to really earn, especially Eldon's trust, and like actually just hung out with him without a camera, and for basically 2 years to get to that place.
Yeah, no, because I mean, I know like one of the first pieces of tape that I saw was that sort of grotesque slurping thing that he does early on. And I was like, well, I don't know about that. I don't know about this. But when there were moments, that, David found as he did most of the searching through the footage, and there's like the one where he talks about his sister, and he's like, I love my sister. She's the only family I have. And it was kind of just a moment like that was enough to say, okay, there's a movie here, there's a story here, there's a real person at the center of this core. Although back to the point that you were making, I think plenty of people are doing his act right now and have taken it much higher than he ever did.
Yeah, there's a lot of trolling and toxic masculinity,
And some of them ride it well beyond whatever plateau the mentors reached.
Maybe to a one-term presidency.
Yeah, well, I do think what's interesting is how you express near the end of the film, not to get too much into spoilers, but you really show the cultural impact that was had that I mean, you wouldn't have noticed unless you were paying attention that El Duce had such a huge cultural impact.
Well, yeah, that was a kind of a complicated sequence to put together, because we wanted to include people, some of whom might have been a direct influence, but others who were just sort of picking up on different strands of his act. And it gets complicated because there are some folks who've taken one part of his act or another, who I'm a big fan of, and then there are other folks who give me the creeps, because I think in his legacy is complicated that way. But if we talk about influence and change, it's hard always to find a causal relationship, but I'd say he's certainly a link in a chain that I don't know if it starts with Lenny Bruce through Andy Kaufman, ultimately to South Park and beyond, that he's part of that. The mentors are part of that continuum.
It's weird because everyone that you mentioned was sort of imbued with some self-destructive traits. Right? Like all of them, from Lenny Bruce to Andy Kaufman to El Duce himself. Like there's this sort of, self-sabotage, self-destructive. I'm blown away by this doc. Like I said, it left a good movie taste in my mouth, because not every doc I see has this sort of epic scale. I'm really curious because I don't know exactly when you finished it before. It's like now it's out commercially. It's on the Arrow streaming service, just so people know. Arrow release, which they do these great. Arrow is great at putting out special edition DVDs. My understanding is there's a VHS special edition of the El Duce tapes. Oh my God! Which if I had a VHS player, I would probably I'd have to get one, but it's on the Arrow streaming service. It's on it'll be on video on demand platforms. So look it up. But I really want to know how audiences are responding to this. I care less about critics, because I think that there's a certain critics that just want to, I don't know. They criticize stuff for the wrong. I've never felt part of that club. I've never felt part of the club of traditional movie critics, because my taste is so fucking weird. I mean, I don't know what else to say. But I'm really curious how people are responding to this film.
People have been, I think they're really smart. I've been really pleasantly, happy with. They've been really smart and are sort of appreciating, what a surprising emotional ride it is. They're maybe a little harder on El Duce than I would be, of this is what a disgusting person kind of a thing. But, it's been really nice, and there's not a lot of pearl clutching, so that's a relief so far.
Oh wow, pearl clutching! I see a lot of that on social media. Pearl clutching. I just think that this would play like I feel like there's certain audiences, like for example, the audience that goes to the Alamo Drafthouse would love and embrace this film. Not sure that people that go to the Laemmle Theater would like this film.
I don't know, when we played at Hot Docs in Canada, it was largely a middle-aged, upper class, Canadian audience who looked kind of like a Laemmle crowd, and they got it, and they had some really they had some really on the nose questions too. I think it's kind of in a way, probably it might play better in a theater where it's harder to quit.
Right.
Because we certainly loaded the front, with a lot of the most with some really challenging material. And so for people who don't make it past the first 20 minutes, they're going to have a radically different experience than people who stay through the bitter end.
We did have a few walkouts in the festival.
I would expect
from those first 20, 30 minutes. You have to establish the act and, let people know what all the hubbub is about.
Well, it's also kind of a litmus test. If you can make it past the first 10 or 15 minutes, then you'll be good.
Yeah, and the payoff is well worth it for this journey. It's really an incredible story. Gentlemen, thank you so much. The El Duce tapes on the Arrow streaming service, available now. Look for it, see it however you want to. See it on VHS if you can find a VHS player. There is a VHS edition. Rodney and David, I want to thank you, and I want to thank our sponsor, Storyblocks. Go to storyblocks.com/film threat, especially useful tools if you're a documentary filmmaker creator. Guys, congratulations. The doc is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Chris. That means a lot.